Well, a pleasant evening to everyone out there, and welcome to the Issues Live. And since our last program, we have had some more interesting developments in our irrepressible political arena. First was the aborted attempt by House Speaker Rupert Griffith to put the official stamp on President Robinson's extension in office. And next came the announcement by the UNC leader Bassirou Pandey that he intends doing everything to frustrate the appointment of a speaker to the new parliament whenever it is convened. And of course, the response to this from the Attorney General, Glenda Moraine, insisting that a speaker will in fact be appointed. And of course, well, people might refer to them as peripheral issues, but very serious and important. The opposing positions being taken by the PNM and the UNC on the hapless Biche Secondary School. Now, before we get into the discussion, let me introduce the panel this evening. First of all, once more, we have the equally irrepressible Percy Cizia, a well-read columnist in the Trinidad Guardian, and also a commentator on the politics. He's also a business consultant. Very pleasant welcome.
Thank you very much.
Sincere welcome. Dr. Sastry Moonan, who is well known also to the program. He is a man of many parts indeed. He's also qualified in law. He's a political scientist. He's a columnist. He's a commentator. And we want to welcome you this evening to the discussions once more. On Dr. Moonan's right is a newcomer to the studio and to the program, and we know that it's not going to be the last of his sojourns here. He is a well-known attorney at law, Martin George. He has been writing some severe pieces on the unfolding political drama, as I refer to it this evening, and much of it has been carried in the news media, and some very interesting commentaries on what is going on, and some very interesting proposals for solutions to the what is referred to as the gridlock. Now, later on, we'll try to get in as many calls as possible from you, the audience out there. We simply ask you to be as brief and to the point as you can so that we can accommodate as many of you as possible. First of all, we want to deal with this question of the issue of the extension in office of the president. On the 13th of March, he wrote to the Prime Minister indicating his willingness to stay on for at least 6 months and at most 1 year, given the political scenario where there has been parliamentary impasse and the need to resolve that impasse in order to appoint a successor to the president. So he has offered to stay on. And then you had the situation where, I think it was 2 Fridays ago, where the Speaker of the House, the present Speaker, Rupert Griffith, traveled to Tobago to present the president with what was referred to as the instrument of office. And of course, it is well known that the president found the instrument to be lacking as far as the wording was concerned, and as far as we know, there has been no second attempt by the Speaker to have that situation rectified. But first of all, gentlemen, I want to find out from the panel whether it was in fact necessary for the Speaker of the House to attempt to put the official stamp on the extension, given what is outlined in, I think, Section 33 of the Constitution with respect to...
particularly subsection 3.
Subsection 3, with respect to the extension in office of the President. Anyone could jump in.
What subsection 3 says, it says, where for any reason at the date on which the term of office of the President is due to expire under subsection 1 or 2, there is no person entitled by election under section 26(4) to fill the office of President upon its expiration. The current term of that office shall continue 30 days after a person is elected to the office of President, whereupon the current term of office shall expire. So on a plain reading of subsection 3, it appears that there may not have been any need at all for any letter of confirmation or letter of extension, because it seems that the legislation has already provided for that. So while the president may have been correct in taking offense to part of the letter, it appears that he should have taken offense to the entire letter, because the legislation seems to speak on that issue.
Is that your take on the issue, Dr. Moonat?
No, not at all. I agree with his conclusion, but not with the process by which he arrived. When you look closely at Section 33, you will see that the governing word in all the subsections is the word parliament. And so there must be in existence a parliament. Mr. Griffith, or Dr. Griffith, rather, he is functus. He is part of a dissolved parliament. The Prime Minister, or the person who occupies that office now, is the one, after having been appointed, to agree with whoever is the leader of the opposition to have a parliament convened, and the speaker then therein appointed can, because they do have the power to hold an election after 120 days, and which they may not have had sufficient time, so they could have used Section 33, subsection 3, to have the extension for the 30-day period. So that's my take on it.
But what is your disagreement with what Martin George says? I think he has just outlined a situation where there is no parliament, or where there is no where for any reason it says at the date at which the term of office is due to expire. That is for any reason.
Yeah, but read on
there is no person entitled by election under Section 26 to fill the office of president.
Exactly, and when you go back to Section 26, you will see what it is the College of Electors that have, that have to appoint the president. So if you don't have a condition precedent, that is the existence of parliament, any act done by Dr. Griffith is functus, because he had, in law, he had no power to do anything at all.
Could you explain to the listeners what functus means?
Means that he no longer had any power. He was divested of all power after Parliament was dissolved.
So he's no longer the speaker. He should not even be referred to as a speaker.
Of course, in law, yes. And we have to run, the governance of the country has to be by the rule of law and no other means.
Let's hear Mr. Ceesay on this, because I think what I'm hearing is that both panelists agree that Section 33(3) is supposed to take care of the situation, as outlined.
No question about it. It takes care of the situation. There is no need for Mr. Griffith to be running to Tobago. That's a waste of how much it costs to go to Tobago?
Well, I don't know. To reduce the fare,
a waste of taxpayers' money for Griffith to be running to Tobago. As he really said, Griffith has no function to carry out in respect to extending the president's term. The Constitution is very clear. He stays in office until a new president is appointed, until 30 days after
the election.
That's it. That's it. But I go beyond that. Why are we seeking to replace Mr. Robinson with another type president? Why don't we go for the whole hog? Why don't we say, look, get these two people, Manning and Pandey, to decide to change the Constitution and give us a new Constitution in which we have an elected president? You understand me? Now is the time, now is the best time to do these things. Going back to the polls for another stalemate or even one seat majority does not solve the country's problems.
Yeah, I think, Martin, you have made that point.
That's so that we should go for the whole hog right now. You understand me? Rather than have a situation in which, at the moment, the head of government is coming out of the parliament. You understand me? Have the head of government elected by the people.
What are the advantages of that? I mean, that is the American system.
It is the American system because then parliament is not made up of, the ministers don't come from parliament. Parliament is a separate body that makes laws. The president is the executive arm of the government, and he operates the government. But his ministers have to be confirmed by the parliament. He can pick ministers from anywhere he pleases.
But given the kind of acrimony we have seen coming out of the politics, you know, where personalities were brought into play, and this one is saying that this one lied, and this one is saying that this one, I mean, even with respect to the question of the extending of the office of the president, we have had the office of president subjected to a kind of vitriol that should not be, you know.
Well, I can't sit here and agree whether it's not possible or not. I can't sit here and say, I agree to continue the present system. No, I'm opposed to that.
Yes.
This is the opportunity to change it.
Yes.
And I must say so.
Yes.
If I continue to say, well, look, man, you know, these two fellas are two fellas who you can't trust to do anything, we're not going to get anywhere.
But given the reality,
if every person in Trinidad and Tobago thinks like me, they will have to do it.
But there's another point that I think Errol is trying to make, and the thing is, if you examine the way politics operates today in Trinidad and Tobago, we really don't have representative members. Basically, each member of parliament on each side just simply has to toe the party line. Nobody really stands up to the leader and says, look, I don't agree with this or I don't agree with that. Basically, you just toe the line, you do as the leader says, and that's not good for Trinidad and Tobago.
Sycophantic politics.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, you end up with two men basically doing as they wish.
What we call ass-kissing government. I mean, that's what it is.
I would have chosen nicer too.
No, but I mean, what's nice about that? It's a fact, and we have to face it. You understand me? Because we have one man who decides what goes on in Parliament because he controls Parliament. He controls the executive. Yeah. He decides who is appointed president. Make no mistake about it. You understand me? So that he controls the whole couple. No, we don't want that to continue.
Given that reality, do you think either of the two gentlemen at present involved in this thing is willing to give up all that power?
But they both say that they're in favor of constitution reform. But what do they mean by that?
Is it that part of the constitution reform that
let's ask them what do they mean by
that's the whole point. While they've said so, they haven't identified exactly how they want this constitutional reform. And basically, from what we know of both sides, their proposals will only seek to preserve their narrow interests. And the thing is, we as the people have to demand that, look, we get proper constitutional reform that addresses the needs of the nation as a whole.
So what am I hearing? That we say both leaders get together again and agree to convene Parliament properly with
a speaker
for one specific purpose.
Amending the Constitution.
That's correct.
But subject to one limitation.
What's that?
That is, and this may, I'm being very frank and brutal about this, that means that the present president ought to have made a decision in conformity with the will of the people. And the 1818 situation, he should have looked very closely at the law, and he should have tried to reconcile the Interpretation Act, chapter 301, section 45 of that act, with his powers under section 76, subsection 4 of the Constitution, and he should have appointed in accordance with law, not on the basis of the recital, the incumbent, whoever was the incumbent at that time, to form a government.
But given the reality, I mean, given the reality of the situation, we have a government in office. The government in office is a legitimate government.
That's correct, and that's where I disagree with Dr. Moonan, because the point is,
I would say that it is a legal government, but it is illegitimate because it does not have the conformity in accordance with the will of the people.
Okay, but the point is, Section 76(4) does not speak of that, and you see, that is what we need to be
Well,
guided
that's
by.
why you have to look very closely at the rules of construction under the Interpretation
Yeah,
Act.
but you
Yes,
can
and we
have
have done
differences
so.
of
We have
opinion
done
over
so.
that. You know.
We have
You can
done so.
6, 7 differences of
We have
opinion
done
as
so.
to what.
And the thing
what
is, there's
legitimate
nothing
and
that
what
we
is
have
not
seen
legitimate.
that shows
Because
Mr.
at
Pandey
the
should have
basis
been
of it
appointed.
is a moral issue.
Yes, so exactly. Not only a moral issue, it's a critical issue as to where the country goes from here.
Exactly,
But
the
we have-
will
we-
of the people.
We have climbed several hurdles since that has happened.
Exactly,
And we
yeah.
have
It's
to move
water under
on.
the bridge, that's right.
What do we do now to move on and
All
to
right,
get
let
the
us-
country
Let
settled?
us examine these
You
two
know.
men. They both may be facing the end of their political careers for one reason or the other. One, if Mr. Pandey loses the next election, his political career is finished. If Mr. Manning loses the next election, his political career is finished. Therefore, it is critical for both of them, you understand me, to be re-elected. So that is far more important than talking a new constitution. This is a real problem because they're facing a personal dilemma that their political career could end immediately on another election, depending on who loses.
So they are on equal strength and from that point.
Yes.
Or equal weaknesses.
Equal weaknesses.
Equal weaknesses.
All right.
The PNM needs time and the UNC is afraid of time. So that's what we have facing here.
Yes, yes.
You understand?
That sums it
but
up.
the question arises, this is a sterling opportunity for the country
That's
to
right.
move out of this
right.
this system that they've been using over and over again,
That's right.
creating a partisan relationship between the leader on one side of the country and the other leader on the other side of the country.
But if
Trying to put an end to
if
that.
our priority, logically, I agree with you, how do we get there?
Get them.
Go back
No,
to
it's
the
a matter
How
of
them
getting them.
to get there?
They are the people who must do it.
Are we
Only they
talking?
can do
Are
it.
we talking about going back around the table and talking with that objective in mind?
Exactly.
With that objective
That
and that
particular
with that-
single
that's right.
objective in mind.
The objective of
Constitution reform,
constitutional
yeah, yeah.
reform. And the thing is, there are many alternatives, many models we can look at. You know, if, for instance, you look at the question of how they do it in Fiji, they have come up with some creative ways to deal with it. Okay, we can look at some other models which have come from countries like France, where they have 2 sets of elections. So the thing is, if we appoint a team of constitutional and legislative drafting experts, they can come up with 3 or 4 different constructs that we can look at, that we the people can appraise and assess and determine whether we want that, and indicate, look, this is what we want to go with, and call upon the leaders that, look, yes, this is what you have to do. Because as Percy said quite rightly, and this is a point I have been making in my columns, we need to look at the scenario. If an election is called, is there any proof or any study to show that it will come out anything other than 1818 or 1917 at best, which still isn't very workable? So we need to look beyond that. And this, instead of being a crisis, must be seen as an opportunity for the nation.
I
to
want
go
to
forward.
supplement that point, but we are looking, I agree with the countries, but Nigeria is an excellent example where I have first-hand experience where it is working.
What is working?
Where Parliament is working with an executive president, and you have all the tribes, and all the tribes, they have all the differences in terms of religion and different forms of worshiping, but when they come to Parliament, they focus on the national issues. Yeah, you have in Trinidad, and Tobago, I will ask the question: what issues do they really operate under? You know,
What happens
it's
to what
rhetorical.
happens to party politics in the
No,
scenario we are
politics
talking about?
can remain, but you
Yeah.
give every person. When you talk about electing a president, it means you're not electing a political party, you're electing someone. Anybody in Trinidad and Tobago could go up to to decide, well, I am going up for an election as president. Motley could then have a chance, so could Pandey, so could Manning, so could everybody. You understand me? But in my scenario, they must get 55% of the vote. Therefore, they can't depend on any particular race to get 55%. They must get 55%, so that means they have to have a broad spectrum in order to do it. And that will get rid of the racial voting. You cannot continue to extract the executive out of parliament. That is an old, dead pattern that perhaps the British want to hold on to it, let them hold on to it. You understand me? But
Yeah.
you must elect, you understand me, the executive.
Gentlemen, if that scenario does not play out in this present situation, and you have the situation where we are going back to the Parliament, and the PNM is going to try to convene the Parliament and to elect a speaker. In fact, what I'm hearing from the PNM, particularly from the Attorney General, is that a speaker is going to be appointed. How is that going to take place?
She's going to be dreaming one night and it's going to happen.
I imagine she must have her crystal ball, which tells her that.
Not under the present constitution.
It is going to be tricky. It is going to be tricky, I can tell you, because if you look at the standing orders,
I think.
if you look at the standing orders, there are several permutations and combinations. Several permutations and combinations, because I don't know if they have examined the possibility of the UNC proposing a speaker first, because the standing orders don't seem to debar that. So the thing is, that can be a strategy that can be employed by Mr. Pandey, that he proposes one of the members of Parliament of the PNM as the speaker, in which case he would second it, and the PNM will then have to propose their candidate as speaker, because if they don't propose an alternative candidate, then according to the standing orders, that person remains as speaker.
Yeah.
Now, if that person is a member of your parliament and that person is speaker, then you are now down to 17 votes when it comes to any legislation.
And the speaker has a casting vote.
Right, the speaker would have a casting vote, but the thing is, you would then be down to 17 of your members. So there
no
are
question
several...
of a casting vote, you're 18-17.
That's right.
There's no
You
tie
see,
there.
so the thing is, there are several possibilities when one looks at it, and I would love to see how
It'd be very
it's going to be
interesting.
played out.
Well, for one thing, Mr. Pandey said it's going to be madness, and he says he's going to propose 20,000 names for speaker.
But if he proposes 20,000 names, I'm quite sure he's being facetious, but if in fact that is what he intends, it will take him a couple of years to do that, and therefore he will leave the PNM in power for a few years. So I don't think that's what he wants anyhow. You understand?
Yes.
No, I think what Mr. Manning ought to do is to appoint someone who's acceptable to the UNC and get the speaker in office. You understand me? But then you have control of the agenda in Parliament, and you will only bring to Parliament items in which the opposing party must support. You understand me? Unless they move a motion of no confidence in the government, which will not fly anyhow, because you still have
the equivalent.
But you see, at the end of the day, it's not such a practical thing, because I think part of Mr. Pandey's strategy is to frustrate the election of a speaker so as to force the country back to the polls. And I mean, that has been his stated objective. So even if you find a speaker whom they have no objection to, because that's easy, you know, that's easy. The difficult thing is, where do you go from there?
But let's go a little further. Let's say a speaker is appointed by some permutation. Then it means that the present government cannot go beyond possibly October for the latest in office.
With a
because
speaker?
you have, no, you'll have,
the Parliament only has to meet once.
no, but you have the budget coming
Parliament
up.
again for another 6 months.
I know, but you have the budget coming up. What happens then?
Well, no, Mr. Pandey is not going to oppose the budget, would he? I mean, how are we going to run the country?
Well, you never know. He's not going to make things. He's not going to make things easy for the
Percy
PNM.
assumes
I
a
think-
certain amount of reasonableness.
I think what
Well, this is it.
I think what we are hearing is, you know, there was a famous pop group that sang a famous song, I Had a Dream. I think we are all dreaming, because the reality of it is that the quality of diversity, the type of person who they would get, would be a person that they can create opposition to on both sides if they want to.
You mean the Speaker?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, but, you know, it depends largely on if Mr. Pandey intends to support anyone for Speaker or to create a Speaker at all, and which I doubt very much, because that's not in his interest.
It doesn't.
It's not in his interest to create a
so.
Speaker, because if he creates a Speaker, he extends the term of the of the PNM. He does that immediately. This is what he doesn't want. Because as long as the PNM is in there, the longer the PNM stays, the less chance he has of winning an election. He knows that.
Yes.
He knows that.
Yes. Time is his enemy.
Gentlemen, I think we ought then to go back to this question of constitutional reform. Let us examine this. Let us find out what else is necessary. We are saying an executive president.
Right, that's perceived
What else is necessary to ensure that apart from having this executive president, there is no deadlock in the parliament?
Yes. Well,
the parliament will be a separate entity to the executive.
The parliament would be
so
a separate
there's no question.
What then would be the role of the parliament?
What then? To pass laws.
Laws.
Yes.
How would the
that,
parliament be composed in a situation like
well, by elected members.
You were
suggesting... If you are a member of parliament, you can't be a minister, or you can't be a member of the executive. This is the proposition.
Right, a total separation.
You can't say total separation of powers.
Oh, so you're a member of parliament, you have the members of parliament to pass the laws.
Yes.
And then you have the executive arm of the government, which would be made up of
the president and whoever and you probably would have a system in which you'll have a president and a vice president elected. You understand me? And he will then be able to select, and you'll put a maximum of, say, 18 ministers.
Cabinet.
But those ministers will be subject to confirmation by the parliament itself on a simple majority. So that every person who he selects as minister will have to go before a committee of that parliament to be grilled and to be asked questions as to whether he's going to be suitable for the kind of job that they're going to give him.
You must remember, to agree with him, that the British really had the common man to be in a repressive state, so that politics was for the aristocracy.
That's right, you're correct.
Yeah? And they sold that wholesale at the time for people. Yes, and if you go into American diplomatic history, you will see how long it took them, in excess of 11 years, to draft a constitution that was relevant to the American situation.
And relevant to the common man.
And for the common man to rise.
Wasn't constitution reform part of the Crown Plaza Accord?
Yeah, was that not? Well, it was written in there, but
it was written in.
The less said about that Crown Plaza agreement.
No, I'm talking about.
But Pandey has said over and over.
Yeah, they're both.
So is Manning, but
they both mouthed
it. They haven't said what kind.
Given the necessary.
I know what kind of constitution I want for Trinidad and Tobago. I have the whole scenario as to exactly how many members in Parliament. I have the whole thing.
I'm sure
if I had a magic wand, I will put it into existence tomorrow morning and run all these fellas out of town.
Yes,
believe me.
Well, apart from the executive president, there are other options we can look at. And the thing is, at the end of the day, we need to put the whole scenario forward on the table and let us as a country decide. For instance, we can look back, if we look back at the Constitution Commission, we had the 1987 Constitution Commission and the 1972 Wooden Commission. Now, as far back as that Wooden Commission, which is 30 years back, there was a suggestion in the report of that commission that we look at a mix of first past the post and proportional representation.
Yes, we can do that.
You know, and the thing is, when you think of the composition of the panel that comprised that commission, I mean, they were serious legal luminaries and other leading scientists and researchers. Dr. Selwyn Ryan was on that committee, our present Chief Justice was there, and Sir Hugh Wooden was also there, among others. And the thing is, if we look at that, that might present a solution. The thing is, you see, we need to have an appreciation for our history, and when we look back, we might find some solutions. Because if in 1972 that was an issue and proposed as a solution, then maybe that might be of assistance. It may not necessarily work exactly the way they proposed it, because what they proposed was half of the seats to be first past the post, and the other half to be proportional representation.
That's my constitution. But I want a 72-member house, which 36 will be first past the post, and the other 36. And 36 will be elected for the first 4 years, then you have another 36 in the next 4 years.
No, but and look at the American Constitution. You give the federal Supreme Court, that is the equivalent of our Court of Appeal. I know the Privy Council is the final court, but you wouldn't want them to be involved in our business with our own people. And you give them coercive powers to settle the issue where people can then argue logically, as was done in the Gore and George Bush situation. The court must have coercive power. You must have a final arbiter.
Gentlemen, I want to take a short break, and when I come back, we'll put some numbers up on the screen for the audience out there to take part. But I want to find out from you why it is that for some people, proportional representation leaves a bad taste in their mouths. You know, was it because of the opposition to it
certainly did for Dr. Williams.
Dr. Williams
Well, because he
was totally against it.
He wanted to stay in power.
But we want to explore that when we come back.
Okay.
Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
You know, do something.
Well, welcome back to the Issues Live. And before we go to that question about proportional representation and the way people seem to shun it, we have a caller on the line from Port of Spain.
Hello.
Good evening. Yes?
Good evening to the panel.
Good evening.
And we have two commissions. We had the Wooden Commission and we had the Higher Tally Commission. Now I remember as a small person that when Mr. Wooden brought that commission, Dr. Williams went to town on him. And Dr. Williams wanted to equate communal representation with proportional representation. And as Mr. CJ has rightly said, Dr. Williams wanted to rule. But Mr. Percy CJ has a program on a radio station in which he is talking about American-type constitution. Because I just said if he had a magic wand, he will put that immediately into effect. But we have to look at our history. And if we have that reform, we can't reinvent the wheel. We can facilitate both commission reports, voting and higher tally, and then get something and put it out to the nation. But both Mr. Pandey and Mr. Manning, as Mr. Sridhar was saying, let Mr. Manning and Mr. Pandey elect a speaker for one specific purpose, for constitutional reform. And he also said, as Mr. Robinson is going to be off the scene just now, that now is a good time that we, with this interim period, we look at constitutional reform and switch to an executive by president. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we respond to this.
Neither Wooden or Higher Tally proposed an executive president.
No.
They did not propose a separate parliament.
Yeah, this
they
is
merely
something
wanted
completely new.
to tinker with a bit with the British system and the PR thing. They never really go. If they had, in fact, made that kind of recommendation and it was backed by the public, Williams would have been hard pressed to oppose it.
Yes. We have a caller from Barataria. Welcome. Good evening.
Gentlemen.
Yes, good evening.
I just want to make one comment. I want to say that Mr. Pandey had a very good teacher in the name of Dr. Eric Williams. Thank you. Have a good night.
Has a very what?
Had a very good teacher.
Yeah, a good teacher. Well, by whoever.
I mean, I'm flattered, you know. I don't know if it's my age she's referring to.
I think what she's mixing up is the fact that obviously if you inherit this type of constitution, you will behave like the fellow who produced it.
Okay. The question of PR. We spoke about the opposition to it by Dr. Williams and how he felt about, you know, not yielding the power that he had and so on. But it is more than once we have heard that we should look at the vision rather than have one system of first past the post. We should have first past the post and PR. But what are the advantages of that?
Well, the advantages of PR is that you would give people, for example, the ONR, I think it was the ONR who got what, 80 or 90,000 votes in Sri Lanka.
They got no seats.
You had the NAR who got 100 and something thousand votes, and they didn't get any seats either. So this is the whole reason for PR. PR gives an opportunity to a smaller group to get a certain number of votes and get a seat.
So it is more of a democratic process.
That is why if you have a House of Representatives with 72 seats in it, you then give every small group in Trinidad and Tobago, the Muslims, for example, may want to put certain people in there to represent their own interests.
Yes.
So you will break up the idea of ethnic voting, and you would then give groups an opportunity to go in the parliament. Like the Hindus will have a seat in, they will be able to elect people to parliament as Hindus, and others will as well, and you then get all in there debating what is good for Trinidad and Tobago.
Were you having some private consultations with Martin George? Because this is exactly what he's proposing.
Never.
You know.
Maybe he's been reading the papers.
Oh, I don't know.
The thing is,
This idea, what comes out of his head is what is in there.
yeah. But based on that point, if you look at from the 1987 Hayatali Commission, they gave you the figures which showed that in the 1981 election, the ONR got 91,704 votes, and under the first past the post system, they got 0 seats. However, they made a comparison to show that had it been under the proportional representation system, they would have gotten 9 seats. And the PNM, which had gotten 218,557 seats and votes and got 26 seats, instead, under PR, they would have gotten 20 seats.
Now you
so
see why
it's
Dr.
one,
Williams
a
is
more
opposed.
equitable distribution.
Yeah. To give judgment to the point that is being made, the strength of this country lies in the diversity of the people of this country. The continued willingness to have greater strength would be in the same empirical direction.
But so far, this diversity
and the House is the House of Representatives. So we are paying homage to the diversity without reflecting it in Parliament.
In the House of Representatives.
That's true.
Okay, we have a caller from Caroni. Thanks for holding. Good evening. Caroni, are you still there? Caroni. Okay, perhaps he... I think we have a caller from Tobago. Good evening. Yes, good evening. Okay, are you there? I think there's a little telephone that dropped or something. But further on the question of PR and so on, we are hearing about a bigger parliament, 72 people.
Yes.
I think in Martin George's proposal, you were saying that
41.
You were saying 41, and you were saying that people should come from the business community.
I was saying that the additional
manufacturing,
5.
various
this is
interests.
Talking about a nominated system.
Right. Now,
I don't want any nominated people in
This is another construct that we can look at. The point is, no one is saying that, look, this is what it has to be. But the point is, I think at this juncture, we need to examine all the options. Look at the entire spectrum. Let us decide which one we want, take it and go forward, because this country is too beautiful and too good to be wasted as it is being now.
Do you see a national consultation?
Definitely, you have to consult the people on it. You have to, first of all, you have to educate them about what it is and what are the different versions that you want to present, and let them decide exactly which seems more compatible.
You know, it is interesting. I mean, a news release was sent out today pertaining to the International Court of Justice, and one of the points the coordinator of the coalition for the International Court of Justice was making in a letter to President Robinson was that in the election of international jurists to the court, the government representatives of some kind or the other have been complaining that there is not enough transparency in the selection of these people, in the whole process, and that there needs to be public consultation to decide on who these people should be. Now you're talking about the selection of jurists.
Yes.
We are talking about the selection of people who are going to run this country for 5 years or 10 years and so on. And all the public does is go to the polls every 5 years and go through a process that we now say is tainted. So that there is the, I am
no will of the people in Trinidad. There's really no will of the people.
This is the question I'm asking.
And I think it's very, that is the critical point that you are making. You should be a panelist.
I'm sorry.
No, because it's how do you measure objectively as possible the will of the people? Because even in the judicial system, as my learned friend here would know, on certain issue you will duck a certain judge. and you will try to bring your case before another judge, not because of any favoritism, but what his ideas are emotionally that would drive the decision that you want. The maximum transparency that you will get is the will of the people for the election of people who are to be in that House of Representatives.
Okay.
And we don't have that now.
Okay, we have a caller from Tobago, a very expensive call. Yes, we are going to hear you now, caller from Tobago, I hope.
Yes, good night.
Yes, okay. Good night.
I want to say good night to the panel.
Yes?
There's a very burning question I would like to ask Mr. Moonan. He elaborated very much on the decision of the president for electing the PNM into office. I would like him to tell me, if he were in the position, would you like to have a prime minister who was performing a very dangerous move to the nation, like a dictator to the nation, which would jeopardize not only himself and his followers, but the nation as a whole? Would you like to have that person to represent you and on that occasion, in that manner, as a dictator, doing what he wants, has no respect for his colleagues, have no respect for even the president of the nation, doing just what he wants, when he wants, and telling you that you have to do so, and have to do so. Would you like to have that person to represent you?
I will take the question and answer it very frankly. As the president of the country, I would act in accordance with the rule of law. And as the rule of law stands up to tonight, it is, I would have the recitals to the Constitution guide me, but I would look closely and marry the Interpretation Act to the different sections of the Constitution. I have already quoted it, I need not repeat it to you, and wherever that took me, that will be the basis of my decision. And I wouldn't want to know who then becomes the prime minister there. That is not my rule as the president of the country.
Okay, we have El Dorado on the line. Good evening, El Dorado. Hello, yes?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Moonan in that I agree with Dr. Moonan in that from a common sense point of view, the concept of democracy, in my view, means that the majority of people should have a say. Since we had a situation of 1818, it is my view that what the president did, it allowed the Tunapuna seat, which was 210 votes more. Those people had a greater say than 20,000 more people, and the only reason is because the other people were located in different locations. But I just had one question to ask. Before someone crosses the floor, is it necessary for Parliament to be convened? Thank you, good night.
Before someone crosses the floor.
You have to have a floor before you cross. You have to have a parliament before you can cross the floor.
Well, I mean, I think what he's trying to find out is whether in the present scenario, before Parliament is convened, if somebody could go across either from the PNM to the UNC or UNC
that is
to the PNM. Switching
allegiance from one to the other. And then
Mr.
Mr. Manning or Mr. Pandey can go to the president and say, I now have a majority,
That's
right,
and I want to be appointed prime minister. That is what could happen. What happened in the case of Griffith and thing, they crossed the floor because they were already parliamentarians and they crossed the floor.
But you know, given the fragile nature of the politics, you know, it would not be surprising if in the trip between wherever the agreement takes place and the road to the president's house, the guy changes his mind. You know, and
given the history of politics in Trinidad and Tobago, it's not impossible at all.
But that is why we have to move away from the present system completely, because we'll only have a continuous repeat of this.
Right.
We've had this repeat going on along. This crisis has not come about today, you know. This has been going on for a pretty long time, but the people were never concerned about it because there was always a government in there, but that government was moribund. It couldn't really effectively govern the country or change the constitution or do anything that we needed to do in this country. So the people just went along with this until now they've run into a roadblock and they don't know which way to go.
And now we are forced to
you
deal
have
with it.
two men on whom you have to depend to decide this matter. And as I say, they both have a special individual interest to preserve. And that is what is causing the problem.
Okay, we have another caller from Caroni. Good evening. Welcome to the Issues Live.
Good evening.
Yes?
I would like to direct this call to Mr. Munan. He mentioned Nigeria, which is a country...
Before you continue, could you please turn down the volume? Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Could you please turn down the volume on your set?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, he mentions Nigeria, which is a nation, contains over 250 nations. And in that country, the Arthur Lewis model of constitutional democracy has been established. Why is it that no one so far has mentioned Arthur Lewis' name, who is a preponderant of the constitutional democracy, which would establish and give the various ethnic groups and the ethnic minority access to decision-making, which must be equally available to all interests and groups in a polity, and establish that equality of treatment to all groups. Why is the Arthur Lewis model being looked at seriously, which has worked in a place like Nigeria, which contains over 250 nations? Thank you. Good night.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have another caller from Caroni. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Yes?
I see to the point. I think Mr. Pandey should call election after a few months and settle some issue.
You're saying Mr. Pandey should call election?
No, Mr. Marin, sorry. Mr. Marin.
Okay. All right.
Because all this thing is going on in the country, everybody in this deadlock and this issue and this thing going on here, everybody call it, and done his whole thing.
But let me ask you a question. If he calls elections and we go back to 1818, what then happens?
Huh?
If we go back to the 1818 scenario, what happens?
Well, people make a decision. It's not 1818, it's something of a past. Mr. Pandey will be Mr. Manin. If it's 1818, it's one, 1718 or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much. But I think the caller is a little confused there.
Yes, but Errol, you see, that's exactly the point that I've been saying, that, you know, there is nothing to show us that it's going to change very much. The demographics of the country are not going to change overnight. So therefore, it's quite likely, even if elections are called next month, 2 months, that we may come back with an 1818, and that's a reality we need to face and accept before we rush headlong into elections without doing some serious constitutional reform.
All this constitution has provided us is with arrogance and corruption over the years. It has provided us with nothing else. And the reason for that is that we put all the power in the constitution in the hands of one person. That person can manipulate the whole society. He can manipulate the races in the society. He can spend the money in order to do it. The money in the treasury, he can spend it to do that. So if we don't bring an end to that, we will be running straight into a wall and we won't be able to do anything in the future. And we let these two men decide that? No. The people must stand up and say, hey, the two of you, it's time for you to cut this out. And it's time for you to sit down and give us a new constitution. And the more people say that, and the more these programs say that, the more quickly that they will get the message, sooner or later.
Yeah, there must be the popular support for it. And once that is made clear, then I think they will have no choice but to look at it.
Okay, let's see if P.T. Valley will support that. P.T. Valley, are you there?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you hearing?
Yes.
Isn't it about time that we revise the number of seats that are being contested? In 1956, there were 24 seats. In 1961, I believe it went to 30. In either 71 or 76, it went to 36 seats. Since then, the population must have increased by at least 15%. How is it we are still contesting the same number of seats for far larger populations? Is this one of the boards of contention that some country areas have far too many people in the constituency?
Well, gentlemen,
No, there is a system and a format by which the EBC is bound.
That's right.
And it clearly distributes the areas in accordance with that system.
Yeah.
And that is by law, and they have to follow it. The question that arises, though, is are we going to continue to be concerned about just who wins the election? This has been the problem.
And who wins the seat?
Or who wins the seat.
Yeah.
And that person now becomes a person not there by the will of the people, simply because we are on an election campaign for the rest of our lives.
That's right.
Yeah, and the only concern, people say, well, if we give some more seats here, somebody will win. But this is not about somebody winning. This is about where the country goes.
That's right.
To educate the caller, I would ask the caller to go to the Constitution and look at Section 71 and the two following sections and try to think through the constraints that there are under those sections of the Constitution in relation to what Mr. Césaire is saying.
Gentlemen, we have just about 5 minutes again on the program. I want to ask you, given the fact that there is quite a bit of acrimony, bitterness, we have seen where the politics may be heading for the most basis of whatever. Given all of that, the gap between the PNM and the UNC in terms of getting together and discussing keeps widening by the minute. We now have issues like the beach school.
Yes.
People are saying one thing, another party is saying something else, and the children are there. A whole lot of things are happening. We have the issue of the probes that are taking place, the threats that we hear of jail and arrest and lockup. Do you think it is realistic at this point to expect Mr. Pandey and Mr. Manning to get back around the table to talk about constitutional reform as an objective for convening the parliament?
Clearly, they
is that a realistic?
Clearly, they won't do it of their own volition. The thing is, as Percy has said, and I fully endorse that, they are only seeking their narrow interests. So the thing is, it has to be collective pressure from the people to say, look, regardless of which party you may belong to, which party you may support, at the end of the day, let us all sit down and look at the good of Trinidad and Tobago. Because if we don't stop this rot soon, it can consume us all. And the thing is, the two leaders obviously will not do it on their own. We, the people, have to start taking decisions. We have to start standing up and making our voices be heard, because they will not do it.
The constraint is you don't change cultural values overnight. The experience is it takes 800 years to do that. It was Charlemagne in Europe, 800 BC, to where they are now, that reflects the interests of the people. So we have, that was my point from the very beginning. We have to see with what we can work with, how to get there. And we have something important that we can work with, which I share with Mr. Césaire, is the diversity of our people. I'm sure you would see when roll is called in a secondary or a primary school, who answers sometime to the name John, or who answers to the name Singh. We are in that direction. How do we drive it?
And how do we drive it?
Well, as far as I am concerned, we have to continue to press for it. My name is not Pandey, and my name is not Manning. My name is Percy Césaire, citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. I think I have a responsibility to do what I'm doing and to say what I'm saying. And if every person in Trinidad and Tobago start to recognize that they have that responsibility, these two people will start to look up and say, but wait a minute, we're here alone.
That's
the
right.
people go on and leave us.
That's right.
You understand
That's
me?
right.
But if
That's
we
right.
say consistently in a negative manner that all we need to do is to recognize that it is impossible to do it because these two fellas wouldn't do it, my God, I mean, this is, these two people are not the country.
And the thing is, we have certainly had instances in our history and recent history too, where the public came out against something and the government had to bend. The Public Order Act was a case in point.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you see, the thing is, a lot of the polls, pre-election polls, have shown that there's a significant section of the population which they refer to as NOTA, none of the above. They really are not interested in the PNM or the UNC. And the thing is, these are the people who sometimes don't go out and vote at all. But these are the people who have to start making their voices heard, saying that, look, we need to change the system. And the thing is, once that pressure is brought to bear upon the leaders, we keep it going until it is achieved.
All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. We have run out of time, and the panel has spoken. The challenge is out there to both the people and the politicians to get together and do something about this present situation. The talk is constitutional reform. Let us get something that works for Trinidad and Tobago. So we'll continue the discussion another time. Please keep looking at the channel. We'll let you know when that discussion will take place again. Thank you and good night. Well, a very pleasant evening to everyone out there, and welcome once again to the Issues Live. I'm Harold Pilgrim, and less than 2 days from now, the eyes of the world will be on Trinidad and Tobago to see what level of maturity our politicians will or will not employ to deal with a situation that has no precedent in the Caribbean and perhaps the entire Commonwealth. That situation, of course, is where neither of the two political parties in the House of Representatives commands that clear-cut majority that is the basis on which the House is able to function. This evening we want to look at that situation in the context of what is likely to take place in that August Red House chamber on Friday, and perhaps with a view to seeking out prescriptions by which the possibility of hung parliaments can be avoided or at least minimized in the foreseeable future. And I have with me, once again, a very distinguished panel here this evening to discuss that situation. First of all, let me welcome heartily Mr. Hector McLean, who is a former Speaker in the House of Representatives. Present welcome, Mr. McLean. On his right, of course, no stranger to the program and to the studio, Dr. Shastri Moonan, who is a political scientist, and he has lent some of his wisdom, brought some of his experience and knowledge to bear on he's a man of many parts. I see you frowning when I say political scientist. But welcome again, Dr. Moonan, to discuss this very important and significant topic here this evening. On Dr. Moonan's right is Mr. Martin George, who is an attorney at law and who was a guest on a previous program to deal with a similar topic. And he has written extensively in the press about what is taking place with respect to the politics of this country at the present time. Very pleasant welcome to you. Later on in the program, well, perhaps after the next 10 minutes, the first 10 minutes or so, we'll be opening up the telephone lines, and we ask you to be as concise as possible so we can get as many calls in as possible. But let me get something out of the way at the very first. Over the past few days, the spotlight has been particularly on one parliamentarian in the person of the Barataria San Juan representative, Dr. Fuad Khan, who has made several statements in the media. A lot of people are confused by some of what he has been saying, but essentially he is saying that on Friday he is going to exercise his right to vote according to his conscience. That has been interpreted in several ways. Some people think it to mean that he is possibly going to side with the PNM in trying to elect a speaker. And of course, he has come out and not really committed himself to that position, but he says he's voting according to conscience. What do we understand, gentlemen, by vote, by a conscience vote, Mr. McLean? What is a conscience vote in the context of Parliament?
Well, I think that first of all, a conscience vote has not really been known to the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. In some parts of the world, you do have political